Hi, this is O'Connor. Welcome back. I'm so excited we have got to the bottom of our framework, although we may not be halfway through the weeks that we're covering. Let's have a look at inquiry methods and fraud reports. And this is a very difficult area because it takes years and years of practice and experience to really understand these interview techniques that we will talk about in this learning module. Inquiry methods and fraud reports. We're at fraud investigation, and before we depart into other chapters and learning modules, this is the fourth of the 4 areas of inquiry under fraud investigation. We've looked at the Theft Act, we've looked at the concealment, and we've looked at the conversion, and now we're looking at inquiry methods and fraud reports. So the learning objectives, and we're probably more focused on the first 3 and the last one of these objectives, that is to understand the interviewing process, plan and conduct an interview, admission-seeking interviews, and describe the different deceptions and lies used by perpetrators, the different types of honesty testing, and finally prepare a fraud report. If we look at planning the interview, this is the big picture where you need to start. Remember, before you take action, you need to have a strategic plan. So what should that strategy of interviewing consist of? Well, it's going to consist of your knowledge of what is the objective of the interview. And that's probably the most important thing. Are you just developing evidence, or are you trying to take the interviewee across the confession line, so to speak? All right. And having mentioned the interviewee, well, who is your interviewee? Is your interviewee likely to be hostile, friendly, or neutral? That will change the way that you approach the interview and the type of questions that you might ask. And then there's other types of approaches in terms of how you do the questioning. And then, of course, the characteristics of a good interview, you need to do it as soon as possible after the fraud has taken place or when you've got the evidence. Have a positive ending, be objective, and be focused on the evidence, and try not to be biased during the interview process. The potential interviewees could be a whole range of people in the organization or outside the organization. And of course, the qualities of a good interviewer is being unbiased and non-accusatory questioning, being professional, making the interviewees feel at ease, and all of these good things that you don't see in the movies. All right. So, this is basically interview strategy 101. And I want to take you through the interviewee demeanor in this part. Why? Because understanding the interviewee's demeanor, where are they in this reaction to crisis, can help you change the way you ask questions for a more effective outcome of your interview. So at the beginning of the crisis, the reaction is denial. I deny this. I didn't do this. This never happened. This is not happening to me. You're in denial mode. Then after denial becomes anger. Why did I do this? Why did this happen? It's just anger. And then after that rationalization, you start to do those mental gymnastics to calm the mind, to rationalize why did A go to B to C to D in the actions that you have taken or your friend has taken. And then depression, when the reality hits that it may be your fault. You need to take responsibility here. I don't feel as though I'm capable here. Why did I do what I did? All right. And the depression. Okay. And then finally, acceptance. I accept this. Okay. What is done is done. Okay. So do read carefully through the book. Going through these stages, the best way I can teach you is think in terms of DARDA. Da, 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 da. Okay, denial, anger, rationalization, depression, and then acceptance. Now, where the interviewee is on this, you cannot ask the interviewee, where are you in this place at the start of your interview? You need to have that awareness for your experience as an interviewer to think, where is, in all likelihood, your interviewee likely to be? Because if they're in denial, it's unlikely you're going to get them across the confession stage. All right. It's not until they're in the stage of rationalization or depression or acceptance, more likely that you can get them across the confession finish line, is if that is the objective of your interview. So remember, This chapter is the largest in the textbook, but I really want to get to the essence of the different features that you should be taken away to get you interested in why it's important that you need to invest time in becoming a good interviewer. What I'm saying now is part of being a good interviewer is not about knowing all the questions to ask, but it's having that awareness of where your interviewee is at in terms of their mind, okay? Because that will dictate the effectiveness of the questions that you want to ask. All right. So that is the early part I wanted to take you through, understanding the reaction of your interviewee to crisis. Now, here's another way of depicting this reaction across those 5 stages in a little bit more detail, and you can follow up in more detail. Stage 1, denial. Here, as I said, stage 2, anger. Stage 3, bargaining and rationalization. And this is where you might want to talk about, okay, if you do confess, then we need to think about these things that might come, and they might be in a bargaining mode. If we go to depression, then you've got to be very careful in the interview because they may become emotionally weakened by the questions you're asking, and they may not give you logical answers. And it may take them time to get to the next stage, and that is acceptance, where they can begin to cooperate, they can begin to find resolve, they can begin to give you the facts in a sequential order. And you can start to ask them, well, what were you thinking when you were undertaking this theft act? And you get into their motives for why they did what they did. All right. So I haven't even told you how to restructure your questions or how to plan your questioning. I'm really, so far, just talking about the demeanor of the interviewee. Where are they at with respect to their theft act? If they are the perpetrator that you know has perpetrated the fraud. All right. Okay, so there's a mindful to take on board here. So let's just finish this part, and I'll see you in the next stage where we look at understanding the planning of the interview.